I'm Edie Lush. I'm here at the Hub Culture Pavilion in Davos. Very pleased now to be joined by Kevin Rudd. Thanks very much for coming along, Foreign Minister of Australia. Tell me, we have quite a crazy theme here at Davos, shared norms for the new reality. Give me your take on it and what you think about it. Shared norms,
the new reality. I would probably phrase that as shared values for common challenges for the future. Look, I've just come from a big session on China here, where frankly half the debate was, do we have common values with the Chinese in terms of future global challenges? The room was split basically down the middle. But I think what we can do is through the forums of cooperation, actually forge new values of cooperation. Let me give you an example. If we in Asia, for example, were to learn carefully from what went wrong in Europe, you'd look at 200 years plus of general slaughter and bloodshed, after which they finally concluded there must be a better way. And the norms of cooperation, which have emerged through the European experiment since the 50s, have themselves entrenched a value of cooperation. Our challenge is to do that in Asia with the rise of China, so that we don't repeat there the mistakes which Europe made over a couple of hundred years.
I think it's interesting. We've had a couple of people sitting in the hot seat there. We've had the former Prime Minister of Korea who's saying, with his new global green growth initiative, for example, trying to learn from what Korea did, which was not to grow in a sustainable manner, to grow very, very quickly, but in the process destroying the environment. How do you do that in China? Because they're building the equivalent of a New York City, I think, every 2 years, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I first went off to China to work 25 years ago, and I've looked at what they've done the last quarter century. Some of it is really troubling in terms of the reliance on coal-fired emissions. And some of it's pretty encouraging in terms of the recent work they've done in reducing energy intensity, as well as pilot solar cities, as well as a huge investment in renewable energy technologies. So both these things are happening. I think the Chinese, in terms of their own national self-interest, will engineer their own green revolution, their own green transformation. That's my view. But it's going to take a little bit of time. But I think they also have a view that in doing so, they might be able to leapfrog a number of countries in the West who are finding it, shall I say, much more problematic to make the transformation early. Jury's still out. But going back to your question of common values, or shared norms, as you say here in Davos, I would say shared Freds, maybe. If you're looking at the fundamental existential challenges we face, the big challenge of climate change, the big challenge of maintaining the stability of a global economic system, which was under threat most recently, an inherent value of cooperation coming out of that, these are things you can build on. It's not going to be a neat trajectory, but frankly, it's the way to go. Otherwise, we just retreat to some 19th century sort of crazy mercantilist, nationalist view of the world, which takes us in a very bad direction.
But do you think the G20, for example, has a role in this? There's been a bit of kind of comment about the G0 at the moment. You know, has the G20 become irrelevant? Is the world so flat now? Have we got things going on all around the world? Have the big issues like climate change, the recession, the economy, have those become more important than the old methods of cooperation?
Look, I'm on balance an optimist about the G20, and remember it's only been around for a year or so. We had the G7 or the G8 or the G5 and the G6 going back to the end of the first oil shock. It's been around for a while, so let's give this one a bit of a go. And for the first time, what have you got? You've got 5 countries from Asia, you've got 5 countries from the Americas, you have 5 Europeans and 5 of the rest of us who don't quite fit anywhere. Therefore, you have something much more approximating the global economic reality. I think between us we represent about 90% of global GDP. This is a good place to start. With 20 people, you can actually forge some agreements. They can then be translated back into the formal institutions of global decision-making. For example, I think we're seeing some movement now on free trade through the Doha Round. A lot of that's occurred formally and informally through G20 discussions. Some of the breakthroughs at Cancun in bringing into reality the broad agreements reached in Copenhagen the year before. That's come off the back of some informal dialogue through the mechanisms of the G20. So I think as an informal brokering house, and sometimes a formal brokering house of developed and developing countries, Christians, Muslims, frankly, it's got a better chance of pulling off a deal than the pre-existing power structures or no structure at all.
And how do you see Australia fitting in now to this shared reality, the new norms? I'm kind of slightly lost the Davos theme now at the moment, but...
Well, with the new Freds. Look, we in Australia see ourselves very much as a middle power, but with global interests. And the nature of our globalisation experience requires us to be that way. Globally, I think we're number 12 economy. In Asia, we're the number 4 economy after China, Japan, India. Therefore, for us, there is no alternative but to be active multilateralists. And so whether it's globally through the G20, we're active, helping to shape agendas to the extent that we can with new partners, whether it's Turkey, whether it's Brazil or whomever, South Africa. But also in our own region, evolving slowly the habits of cooperation in East Asia. We have now America as a member of the East Asian Summit, which brings together the big economies of Northeast Asia, all of Southeast Asia, Australia, India, New Zealand, and now America and Russia. You've got, therefore, the mechanics and the institution capable of shaping a new sense of community in Asia and the Pacific. And if we can use that to establish the norms of cooperation that evolved in Europe post the 50s with their experiment, then I think we can have some confidence in a prosperous and stable future. If we don't, and instead we just retreat to the brittle nationalisms, which lie not far below the surface in a pretty primordial 19th century sort of way. If we don't overcome that, then I think we've got a difficult road ahead.
Just wanted to ask you finally, been a lot of discussion on the sidelines here in Davos about the Doha Round of trade, and of course very important for Australia as well. Can you give me your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we're a nation of free traders, and we've been at it for decades now. In fact, the Australian Labor government, of which I'm a member, opened our economy to free trade back in the 80s. We virtually have no tariffs. And it's been a universal success story for Australia. Challenges on the way, but it's been good. In Doha, we're one of the group of 7 negotiators. We represent the Cairns group of free agricultural traders. My sense is that we're beginning to see some movement, both from Washington and from Beijing. Certainly the discussion we have with our negotiators and with our trade ministers around the world is that we're now seeing a productive approach to problem solving rather than finding mechanisms to avoid progress. So fingers crossed, 2011 may be the year of pulling it off. And if we do, given that the world economy needs a massive shot in the arm of confidence and new activity, and given the world is constrained because of public debt burdens in so many of the advanced economies, this will be a huge injection of new growth and jobs for the world economy.
Kevin, thanks very much for stopping by the Hub Pavilion here in Davos, and I'm Edie Lush.